Bhaya Janmadyasya Yato Niviyad Itaratas Chartesu Vikyaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yat Surayaha Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatrati Sargo Misha Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi. O my Lord Shri Krishna, Son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes, of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion. As one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water, only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma pujita kaitravotra paramo nirmatsaram satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mula Srimad Bhagvate Mahamani Krite Kim Vaparir Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridi Avaridite Tra Kriti Behi Sususabhistakshanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhur aho raska bhuvi bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagvatam, the mature fruit of the desire to hear Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful. Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantak Stohi Padrani Vidunati Srihitsatam. To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend, and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. Nastapresu abhadesu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamasloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. Tatarajastamo bhava kamalobadayaschaye cheta itaranavidam stitvam sattve prasidati. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished. Evam prasana manaso Bhagavat Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangha Sijayate. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Vidyate Hridaya Grantis Chidyante Sarvasamsaya Siyante Jashikarmani Drista Evatmanishware. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the heart knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality, Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of God, of Krishna, the science of Krishna. Shri Guru Vastika prayers ki jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet as such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy names, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he's relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end. He feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his devotees in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, claim their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzed as that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava. And their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. I offer my most humble obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto Lotus Feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam. Chintamani Prakata Satma Sukalpa Riksha Laksha Vrite Susuravira Bipalyankam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvanantam Aravinda Dalaytaksham Bharhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Visesha Sobham Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasat Vanamadyavansi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shyamam Jivanga Lalita Niyata Prakasam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sadurlabha Madurlabha Matma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatam Jagananda Kotim Yaschaktirasti Jagananda Chayaya Danta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusaha Suktaryameva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabhis Tabilya Eva Nijarupa Tayakalabihi Goloka Eva Nivasata Kilatma Bhuto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadaiva Hidesu Vilokayanti Yashama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Yamena Tistan Nanavatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumam Yo Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Parama Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagananda Koti Koti Swase Suvasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Ashesa Bhutam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagananda Satani Sute Jagun Yatad Vishaya Veda Vitayamanam Sattva pralambi parasattvam visuddha sattvam. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami kalabi. Ananda chinmaya rasat mataya manasu. Yat praninam pratifulam smaratam upetya. Lilayatena bhuvanani jayat yajasram. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Goloka namni nijadamni tale chatasya. Devi mahesa haridama sate satesu. Te te prabhava nichaya vitascha yena. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Shristi stati pralaya sadhana sakti reka sadhana. Chayeva yasya bhuvanani vivarti durga. Ichchanurupam apiyasya chestate sa. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Shiram yata dadi vikara visesa yoga. Sanjayate nahitata pritagasti hetoho. Yasambutam apitata samapaiti karyat. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Dipachid eva hitasantaram abhyupetya. Dipayate rivita hetu samanu dharma. Yastadrigeva hicha vishnutaya vibhati. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yakarna narnava jale bhajatisma yoga. Vidrammananta jagadanda saroma kupaha. Adhara shaktim avalamya paramsva murtim. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yasyaika nisvasitakala matavalamya. Jivanti loma vilaja jagadanda nataha. Vishnur mahansahi yasya kalabhishesho. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Basmanyatasma sakalesu nijesu tejaha. Swayam kiyat prakatayat apitadvalyatra. Brahmaya esa jagananda vidana karta. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yat pada palava yugam vinidaya kumbha. Tvande pranama samayesa kanadi rajaha. Vignam vihantam alamasya jagatrayasya. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Agnir mahi gaganamambu maruti sascha. Kalastatatma manasitti jagatrayani. Yasmad bhavanti visanti yamcha. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yatschak sudesa savita sakalagrahanam. Raja samasta suramurti rasesa tejaha. Yasya gaya brahmati sambrita kala chakro. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Dharmo tapapa nichaya sutayastapamsi. Brahma dikita patagava deyasta jivaha. Yadata matra vibhava prakata prabhava. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yastrindra gopa matamendra mahosvakarma. Bandhanurupa falabhajana matanoti. Karmani nidaheti kinchu bhakti bhajam. Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. Yam krodha kama sahaja pranayadi bitti. Sayamoha guru guru. Vatsalya moha guru gaurava sevya bhava hai. Sanchintya tasya sadrisim tanamapurete. Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami. Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpatarvo. Druma Bhunish Chintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam. Kata Ganam Natyam Gamanam Apibam Sipriya Saki. Chidanandam Jyoti Param Apitad Asvadyam Apicha. Sayacha Shiradibhi Shravati Shirabhibhyascha Sumahan. Nimesa Dakyuva Rajati Nahiya Tripi Samaya. Bhaje Swita Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golokam Itiyam. Vidantas Te Santakshiti Viralachara Katipaye. Shri Supanishad Ki Jai. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Ishavaishamidam Sarvam Kijat Kinja Jagatyam Jagat Tena Taktena Bunjitaha Magridaha Kashasviddanam. Kurvani Vaha Karmani Jajiva Chekchatam Samaha Ivam Tvayi Nanyate Tosti Na Karma Lipite Nare Karmani Asuya Namate Loka Andena Tamasavritaha Tamste Pratya Bigachanti Yeke Chatmahano Janaha. Anijadekam Manaso Javio Naina Devam Apravam Pravam Asata Davato Nyana Teti Tista Tasmina Pomatarisvatadati. Tade Jatita Nejatita Dure Tadvantike Tadantarasya Sarvasya Tadu Sarvasya Shabayataha. Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atmani Evanupasati Sarvabhute Sachatmanam Tatuna Vijagupsate. Yasmin Sarvani Bhutani Atmeva Budvijanataha Tatrako Mahakaha Sukha Ekatvam Anupasyataha. Saprayagat Chukamakayam Avranam Asnavidam Sudam Apapavidam Kavir Manisi Paribu Swayambu Yatatat Yatoratan Vyadadach Jasvatipyaha Samabhyaha. Andam tamaha pravisanti ye vidyam upasate tato bhuyavite tamo yayu vidyayam rataha. Anyadeva hurvidyaya anyada hurvidyaya iti susrumadinanam yenastad vichichakside. Vidyam cha yasyas Vidyam cha yas tadvedo bayam saha vidyaya miritum tirva vidyayam rinam vidyayam ritamasnate tadvedo bayam saha vidyaya miritum tirva Antam tamaha pravisanti ye sambhutim upasyate tato bhuya vitetamo ya sambhutam ritam yastu sambhutam no, I'm sorry. Yeah. Tato bhuya vitetamo yayu sambhutam rataha. Anyadevahur sambhavat anyadahur sambhavat iti susrumadhiranam yenastad vichachakside dam tamapani sambutim pasatato bhyavitena yayu sambhatamata sambutim cha vinasam cha yastad vedobhayam saha minasena militum tidva sambutam ritamasnute Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pitam mukam tattvam pusamapavrinu satyadharma yajistaye Pusane kaseyamastruya prajapatya vyuharasmin samahatejo yatte rupam kayanatamam tate pasyami yosavaso purushaha sohamasmi Vayuranilam amritam atetam basmantam sariram om kratos smara kritam smara kratos smara kritam smara Om Agnenaya Supatare Svan Vishmani Devavunu Yadnid Vidman Yod Ajmas Juhuranami No Buyustam Te Nama Utim Vedama Om Tatsat Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, Text 27. Tokena jiva haranam yad uluki kayas. Chamasikasya chapada sakato pavrita. Yadringatantara gatena divis visurva. Unmulanam tva itaratar junayorna bhavyam. Translation: There is no doubt about Lord Krishna's being the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how was it possible for him to kill a giant demon like Putana when he was just on the lap of his mother, to overturn a cart with his leg when he was only 3 months old, to uproot a pair of Arjuna trees so high that they touched the sky when he was only crawling? All these activities are impossible for anyone other than the Lord himself. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One cannot manufacture a God by one's mental speculation or by numerical votes, as has become a practice for the less intelligent class of men. God is God eternally, and an ordinary living entity is eternally a part and parcel of God. God is one without a second, and the ordinary living entities are many without number. All such living entities are maintained by God himself, and that is the verdict of the Vedic literatures. When Krishna was on the lap of his mother, the demon Putana appeared before his mother and prayed to nurture the child in her lap. Mother Yasoda agreed, and the child was transferred onto the lap of Putana, who was in the garb of a respectable lady. Putana wanted to kill the child by smearing poison on the nipple of her breast. But when everything was complete, the Lord sucked her breast along with her very air of life, and the demon's gigantic body, said to be as long as 6 miles, fell down. But Lord Krishna did not need to expand himself to the length of the she-demon Putana, although he is quite competent to extend himself more than 6 miles long. In his Vamana incarnation, he posed himself as a dwarf Brahmana, but when he took possession of his land, promised by Bali Maharaj, he expanded his footstep to the top of the universe, extending over thousands and millions of miles. So it was not very difficult for Krishna to perform a miracle by extending his bodily feature, but he had no desire to do it because of his deep filial love for his mother, Yasoda. If Yasoda had seen Krishna in her lap extending 6 miles to cope with the she-demon Putana, then the natural filial love of Yasoda would have been hurt, because in that way Yasoda would have come to know that her so-called son Krishna was God himself. And with the knowledge of the godhood of Krishna, Yasoda would have lost the temper of her love for Krishna as a natural mother. But as far as Lord Krishna is concerned, he is God always, either as a child on the lap of his mother or as the coverer of the universe. Vamanadeva, he does not require to become God by undergoing severe penances, although some men think of becoming God in that way. By undergoing severe austerities and penances, one cannot become one or equal with God, but one can attain most of the godly qualities. A living being can attain godly qualities to a large extent, but he cannot become God, whereas Krishna, without undergoing any type of penance, is God always, either in the lap of his mother or growing up, or at any stage of growth. So, at the age of only 3 months, he killed the Sakatasura, who had remained hidden behind a cart in the house of Yasodamai. And when he was crawling and was disturbing his mother from doing household affairs, the mother tied him with a grinding pestle. But the naughty child dragged the pestle up to a pair of very high Arjuna trees in the yard of Yasodamai, and when the pestle was stuck between the pair of trees, they fell down with a horrible sound. When Yasodamai came to see the happenings, she thought that her child had been saved from the falling trees by the mercy of the Lord, without knowing that the Lord himself, crawling in her yard, had wrecked the house. So that is the way of reciprocation of love affairs between the Lord and his devotees. Yasodamai wanted to have the Lord as her child, and the Lord played exactly like a child in her lap, but at the same time played the part of the Almighty Lord whenever it was so required. The beauty of such pastimes was that the Lord fulfilled everyone's desire. In the case of felling the gigantic Arjuna trees, the Lord's mission was to deliver the 2 sons of Kuvera, who were condemned to become trees by the curse of Narada, as well as to play like a crawling child in the yard of Yasoda, who took transcendental pleasure in seeing such activities of the Lord in the very yard of her home. The Lord, in any condition, is Lord of the universe, and he can act as such in any form, gigantic or small, as he likes. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There is no doubt about Lord Krishna as being the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how was it possible for him to kill a giant demon like Putana when he was just on the lap of his mother? To overturn a cart with his leg when he was only 3 months old, to uproot a pair of Arjuna trees so high that they touched the sky when he was only crawling. All these activities are impossible for anyone other than the Lord himself. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we see this is all about the special, unique qualities and feats or accomplishments performed by Krishna that cannot be emulated by anyone else. And Prabhupada writes a letter to Satsvarup Das on 3rd November 1974. And he makes some very, very salient points in this letter. And he says, regarding those professors who say that Shiva is the supreme, in the Rig Veda it is stated, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam. The lotus feet of Lord Vishnu are the supreme devotional platform. There Vishnu is accepted as the supreme. So there are 18 Puranas. 6 of them are for persons in a mode of ignorance. Some of those in passion, and topmost are for those in goodness, the Sattvic Puranas. If one intelligently reads the Puranas and Vedas, then he can understand that Vishnu is the supreme person. But for those on the stage of ignorance and passion, sometimes such statements are there. So it depends on the quality of the nature. Well, that sentence there, he says, but for those on the stage of ignorance and passion, sometimes such statements are there. That is, statements like Shiva is the supreme God. So it depends on the quality of the nature of the person that one accepts Lord Shiva or Lord Vishnu as the supreme. But one who studies scrutinizingly all the Vedic literature and who accepts the statements of the Acharyas who guide the destiny of Vedic culture of India, who all accept Vishnu as the supreme person, then he will have the same conclusion. So far, we are concerned in the Krishna consciousness movement. We are preaching the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is the supreme person even before all demigods, including Lord Vishnu even. And of course, Lord Shiva. Our fundamental principle is the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Those persons who cannot understand this on account of particular modes of nature, such persons require further education, and until such time is fulfilled, we are helpless. To an animal in the modes of ignorance, how can we preach? Then we are helpless. I have read your letter to the professor, and it is a good challenge. You have written nicely. You have correctly cited the Vedas, wherein it stated, Eko Narayana Asin, na Brahma na Isano. In the beginning, there was no Brahma, no Shiva, only Krishna. The cosmic manifestation is from Mahatattva. And before the Mahatattva, there is Narayana. Sankaracharya is a Lord Shiva worshipper and an incarnation of Lord Shiva. He admits that Narayana is the master, and Narayana is the supreme. Narayana Paro Vyaktat. This is the best authority. What more evidence you want? This is in his Sankabhasya on Bhagavad Gita. This is not even the statement of the Puranas, but of Sankaracharya's own writings. How can you deny if the incarnation of Lord Shiva says that Krishna is the supreme? In the Puranas, it is stated that another demigod is supreme, just to convince the devotees. This is the devotees of the demigod. Just like a student in primary school, he thinks the primary education is everything and has no idea of higher education. This is to convince the devotees. But from the Gita, we understand that it is from Krishna that he gives faith by which one can worship the demigods. Yeah, so in the Bhagavad Gita, this is a very interesting verse. And you would say, oh, why does Krishna say this? Well, now we know why. He says in the 9th chapter, if I'm not mistaken, wait a minute. Yeah. Actually, in the 7th chapter, he says, Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta sadayarchitam ichite tasya tasya chalam shraddham tameva vididam yaham. 7th chapter, 21st verse, he says, I am in everyone's heart as a supersoul. As soon as one desires to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. So, when he says, this is to convince the devotees, but from the Gita we understand it is from Krishna that he gives the faith by which one can worship the demigods. Well, let's understand why he does that. in the purport, Prabhupada says, God has given independence to everyone. Therefore, if a person desires to have material enjoyment and wants very sincerely to have such facilities from the material demigods, the Supreme Lord as Supersoul in everyone's heart understands and gives facilities to such persons. This is an amazing statement. Now we're learning something. Now we know why some people worship the demigods. They think Shiva or this one or that one is the supreme. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, he does not interfere with their independence, but gives all facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. So this is frightening. Why? Because everything is going to depend on our desire. So if we're desiring sense gratification, even though we want to be Krishna conscious, then we can be, and if we insist on it, always thinking about it, always meditating on it, then Krishna will give it to us. Therefore, everything depends on our desire. So the more we hear about Krishna, the more we will, and the more we're educated in who Krishna is. So this verse today is all about educating us about Krishna's unique qualities that no one else can emulate. So that should gradually purify us by understanding Krishna's unique qualities. That's why Bhagavatam is all about Krishna and understanding Krishna. So, the Supreme Lord, as Supersoul in everyone's heart, understands and gives facilities to such persons. So it understands that people are meditating. On the outside they can say Hare Krishna. On the inside they're meditating on sense gratification in some way or other. So then he gives facilities to such persons to get the sense gratification. As the Supreme Father of all living entities, he does not interfere with their independence. Yes, so we have limited independence or limited free will. We can either choose to follow Krishna or choose to have sense gratification. Some may ask, but gives all facilities so that they can fulfill their material desires. Some may ask why the all-powerful God gives facilities to the living entities for enjoying this material world, and so lets them fall into the trap of the illusory energy. The answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Supersoul does not give such facilities, then there's no meaning to independence. Yeah, in other words, we would be robots. We'd be forced to act in a certain way. And a robot cannot love, cannot attain love. This is the main point. If you have a robot, and the robot is programmed to say certain things, right? So if you say, "I love you," and then the robot say, "Well, I love you," right? But does it mean that? Right? Yeah, it's just programmed to say it. Just like you have the GPS, and GPS says, "Now turn left in 100 yards," right? Now turn right in 50 yards. Well, is the person speaking really, let's say, a person? Well, the person speaking is recorded, but the recording is not a person, right? It's simply imitating the person. So it's a separated energy. Just like when we hear Prabhupada's lectures. Is Prabhupada actually there? No. He's somewhere else. But we can hear it. So it's a separated energy. So in the case of the robot who said, "Well, I love you," does it mean that actually? No, it doesn't mean that at all. The robots don't know what love is. Right? So now, okay, let me ask you a question now. How would you differentiate a person who genuinely loves you from the robot's words, "I love you"? How would you differentiate? Think about it. Well, yeah, go ahead.
There's emotion involved.
Yes. Well, look, if we say we're acting as if we like the pujari is acting as if he or she loves the Lord. So what do they do? Or like every day we're having Guru Puja, right? So sometimes the pujaris just put some flowers in a plate, right? And then we take them off. And sometimes they spend time making a special flower to put in the Prabhupada's hand, right? It takes some time to do that. And therefore, those extra things that people do will demonstrate that they love. They don't have to do it, but they will do it. Now, can the robot do those extra things? No, it can't do that. It's just programmed saying, I love you, that's all. Doesn't mean anything, because the robot can't do anything to demonstrate it. So, of course, robots, like, they have these robots, they use them for sex. And then someone would say, well, the robot's giving sex. The robot's not giving any sex. It's just programmed to do certain things. That's it. But there's no real emotion or love being manifested, because that would be something extra, and it would be something creative, right? Just like, let's say it's the 50th birthday of somebody who's married, so his wife organizes a surprise party, and the person walks in somewhere, all of a sudden there's like 500 people and say, happy birthday, and then everyone's chanting and jumping up and down, and the person is overwhelmed. It's, oh my God, it's just, I didn't know all these people loved me like this, right? So you see that those extra things that evoke emotions and at the same time are indicative that someone actually has love, because they go to all this extra trouble to please the person. Okay, so when Swarup Damodar and other intimate devotees of Lord Chaitanya were with him, when the Lord would go into states of ecstasy, they would quote verses that he could taste and just increase his ecstasy. And they would sing they would sing the verses also. And it all depended on what direction the Lord's emotions were going into. So they knew hundreds and thousands of verses, as well as different ragas. And why did they develop all this acumen or expertise? To help the Lord relish more and more states of love, for Krishna. And their love for the Lord, who is Krishna also, prompted them to give up everything else and learn all these things. It's very specialized, right? I mean, you and I couldn't do it, sitting next to Lord Chaitanya and then understanding where his feelings are going to, and then quoting a pertinent verse that just increases his ecstasy, and singing it in a special raga that is even more powerful, you see. So that's all. That is based on love. The robot could never do anything like that. Okay, so this verse 7. Let's finish the purport. So he says, the answer is that if the Supreme Lord as Super Soul does not give such facilities, then there's no meaning to independence. Therefore, he gives everyone full independence, whatever one likes. But his ultimate instruction refined in Bhagavad Gita, one should give up all other engagements and fully surrender unto him. That will make man happy. Whoa, this is a big statement now. Everyone wants to be happy, but very few people are going in the right direction to be happy. They think happiness is their own sense gratification. But real happiness begins when you surrender completely to Krishna. So this is completely opposite to what people understand, you see. That's why Krishna consciousness is so difficult for people to understand, because it's completely opposite to everything they've learned and everything they've heard. Both the living entity and the demigods are subordinate to the will of the Supreme Personality Godhead. Therefore, the living entity cannot worship the demigod by his own desire, nor can the demigod bestow any benediction without the supreme will. As it is said, not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality God. In other words, even if you want sense gratification for selfish purposes, you can't do it on your own. You need Krishna's help. And even if the demigod wanted to someone to worship him or her, it wouldn't happen without Krishna's help. In other words, nothing can happen without Krishna. Therefore, whether it's sense gratification or whether it's pure devotional service, you can only do it with the help of Krishna. You can't do it on your own. See? How would you even see the demigods? You can't even see them, right? So all this, it just shows that not even a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's a very important point. Whether you want sense grat or you want Krishna, you can't do it without Krishna's help. Generally, persons who are distressed in the material world go to the demigods, as they are advised in the Vedic literature. A person wanting some particular thing may worship such and such a demigod. For example, a diseased person is recommended to worship the sun god. Yeah, they do Surya Namaskar every morning. I went to India one time, and somebody said to me, "Oh, let's go take a walk on Juhu Beach, and chant our rounds." This is before the sunrise. It was right after Mangalarti. I said, "Okay." So we walked on the beach, and some place we decided to sit down a little bit on the sand and chant, looking at the ocean. And some guy came, and it was the beginning of the sun coming up, and he faced the sun, and he did the whole Surya Namaskar in front of us. He was going up and down and out and this way and that way. And it was very interesting to see that, and they do that for health. The Surya Namaskar is a whole exercise. Actually, it's a gymnastic thing, but also there's prayers that go along with it. So, and you have to do it when the sun is coming up. Right? As it is said, not a blade of grass moves. So, a person wanting some particular thing may worship such and such a demigod. For example, a diseased person is recommended to worship the sun god. A person wanting education may worship the goddess of learning, Saraswati. And a person wanting a beautiful wife may worship the goddess Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva. In this way, there are recommendations in the Shastras, Vedic scriptures, for different modes of worship of different demigods. And because a particular living entity wants to enjoy a particular material facility, the Lord inspires him with a strong desire to achieve that benediction from that particular demigod. And so he successfully receives the benediction. The particular mode of the devotional attitude of the living entity toward a particular type of demigod is also arranged by the Supreme Lord. The demigods cannot infuse the living entities with such an affinity. But because he, Krishna, is the Supreme Lord of the super soul who is present, or the super soul who is present in the hearts of all living entities, Krishna gives impetus to man to worship certain demigods. The demigods are actually different parts of the universal body of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, they have no independence. In the Vedic literatures, it is stated, the Supreme Personality Godhead as super soul is also present within the heart of the demigod. Therefore, he arranges through the demigod to fulfill the desire of the living entity. But both the demigod and the living entities are dependent on the supreme will. They are not independent. So here we see nothing happens without Krishna's intervention or help. Right? whether it's sense gratification or whether it's going back to Godhead, you can't do it on your own. Krishna has to help you. See? And no one is really independent. This is very interesting because when a devotee understands this, then he's no longer in ignorance. And all kinds of desires are coming into the mind all the time. But we should always come to the conclusion, although this thing sounds good or this desire seems to be good for my sense gratification, but actually I just want Krishna. I don't want anything else. So if that is the final conclusion in the mind, then Krishna will protect you. But if you just focus day and night on the sense gratification, and finally Krishna puts his hands up and says, okay, I give up. You really don't want me, so okay, so I'll give you this sense gratification, Okay, and then it says in the 9th chapter, so this is 7th chapter, verse 21. And the 9th chapter it says, those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way. So wait a minute, let's see, one before that. So actually, when they worship the demigod, they're seeking Krishna, but their worship is in a wrong way. Now, what does this mean? So in the purport, Prabhupada says, persons who are engaged in the worship of demigods are not very intelligent, although such worship is offered to me indirectly. So this is like an alternate translation of the verse. Krishna says, for example, when a man pours water on the leaves and branches of a tree without pouring water on the root, he does so without sufficient knowledge or without observing regulative principles. Similarly, the process of rendering service to the different parts of the body is to supply food to the stomach. The demigods are, so to speak, different officers and directors in the government of the Supreme Lord. One has to follow the laws made by the government, not by the officers or directors. Similarly, everyone is to offer his worship to the Supreme Lord only. That will automatically satisfy the different officers and directors of the Lord. The officers and directors are engaged as representatives of the government, and to offer some bribe to the officers and directors is illegal. This is stated here as avidi purvakam. In other words, Krishna does not approve the unnecessary worship of the demigods, but he'll permit it if you insist on it, or if we insist on it. So therefore, in the next verse, he says, Aham hi sarva yajnanam. I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. So then Prabhupada says, here it is clearly stated that there are many types of yajna performances recommended in Vedic literatures, but actually all of them are meant for satisfying the Supreme Lord. Yajna means Vishnu. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that one should only work for satisfying Yajna, or Vishnu. The perfectional form of human civilization, known as Varnashram Dharma, is specifically meant for satisfying Vishnu. Therefore, Krishna says in this verse, I am the enjoyer of all sacrifices because I am the Supreme Master. Less intelligent persons, however, without knowing this fact, worship demigods for temporary benefit. Therefore, they fall down to material existence and do not achieve the desired goal of life. If, however, anyone has any material desires to be fulfilled, he had better pray for it to the Supreme Lord, although that is not pure devotion, and he will thus achieve the desired result. So since Krishna is the only one that can really help us get sense gratification if that's what we want, then why go to the demigods? He can go to Krishna directly because he is the supreme controller. You cannot do anything without his help. But if you go to him, at least there's a possibility that you will learn that sense gratification is not the goal of life, but it's actually a curse that keeps us in the material world. And the more you hear about Krishna, the more you'll become purified from those illicit desires to enjoy separately from the Lord. Okay, so we'll stop right there, and I'm going to do this verse again tomorrow because the Prabhupada gives a lot of evidence in the purport and in the letter to Satsvarup of why Krishna should be worshipped as the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of his unique activities and qualities that no one else can emulate. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So everything depends on what we desire. So by hearing every day like this, we develop and evolve our desire to only worship Krishna and only engage in his devotional service. But if we don't hear this on a regular basis, then we become overwhelmed by so many other exhortations. In other words, people are saying things to entice us to go away from Krishna. So we eventually we'll be convinced by them, because if that's what we're hearing most of the time. So therefore, hearing the news, hearing the watching movies and talking on social media and listening to different lectures by nonsense people and seminars by nonsense people, eventually they win, you lose. And Krishna says, okay, that's what you want, that's what you're going to get. But if we regularly hear these classes and these purports by Prabhupada, then we realize, wait a minute, it might look good, but I don't want it. I just want Krishna. Hari Bol, glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yeah.
From the childhood, I used to do with the water, with the mantras and offering the water.
Oh, really?
The ritual until I started hearing. Then I gradually stopped all those rituals. But from the childhood, because my grandmother, she was doing every morning, offering some water with some prayers, with mantras.
Well, it didn't hurt you to do that. In the absence of knowledge of Krishna, doing things like that is actually okay.
As like a regulation, like everyday morning.
Yeah.
Praying to some god.
Yeah.
That is a special ritual. On Surya Namaskar, there is an exercise aspect to it. But like back home in Bhubaneswar, in our community, I know they do this every Sunday. Sunday is like Ravivar, it's like sun's day. So there is a puja that they do. It's a process for betterment of this. Like if somebody has disease in the family or somebody wants good health and all, they do this. So we were doing like every day because it's if you want something good, why not every day?
Yeah.
Every day morning and
Well, it's good for your health. It's an exercise. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bando Mui Sabadana Mate. You sing. You sing. Bando Mui Sabadana Mate. Krishna Prapti Hoya Te
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Aikha
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Gya
Arna Kori Ho Mone Asa
Arana Koriya Maneya Sa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Je Prasade Pure Sarva Asa
Ye Prasade Pure Samasa
Chakshudan Dilo Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se
Chakshudan Dila Jai Janme Janme Prabhu Se
Dive Gyani De Prakashito
Divya Gyani De Prakasito
Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasa Jate
Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasa Jate Vedika Janara Charito
Sri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu
Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu
Lokana Lokera Aha Prabhu Guru Daya De More Pada Jaya
Ha Prabhu Kura Doya Deha More Pada Jaya
Aha Prabhu Guru Daya De More Pada Jaya
Ha Prabhu Kura Doya Deha More Pada Jaya
Aha Prabhu Guru Daya Deho More Pada Jaya
Aha Prabhu Kura Doya Deha More Pada Jaya Ebeas Kusikti Bhuvana Ebeas Kusikti Bhuvana Prabhupada Illa Sarana Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Namo Vishnupadaya Vishnaprestaya Mudale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namini
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo, 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 Nitagor Haribo. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajika Chasta Tarasatara Shri Shimaris Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Prem Shikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Dvaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaura Premanandi Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Gaura Premanandi Haribol. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavane Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Buddhi Smanti Bhakti Vitzorta Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharini Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarani Gaur Premanandi Haribol. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection, fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth at birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Please give us your lotus feet. Your face spread all over 3 worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan, Ki Jai. I'm almost blessed.